I will now read the Declaration of Conscience as adapted from Heather Cox Richardson's talk. On June 1st, 1950, Senator Margaret Chase Smith, a Republican from Maine, stood up against Republican Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin and his supporters, who were undermining American democracy in a crusade against communism. Smith's party was divided between those who thought the New Deal was a proper adjustment to the modern world and those determined to destroy that new government. Those who wanted to slash the government back to the form it had taken in the 1920s when businessmen ran it had a problem. American voters liked the business regulation, basic social safety net, and infrastructure construction of the new system. To combat that popularity, the anti-New Deal Republicans insisted that the U.S. government was sliding towards communism. With the success of the People's Liberation Army and the Declaration of the People's Republic of China in October 1949, Americans were willing to entertain the idea that communism was spreading across the globe and would soon take over the U.S. Republican politicians eager to reclaim control of the government for the first time since 1933 fanned the flames of that fear. On February 9, 1950, during a speech to a group gathered in Wheeling, West Virginia to celebrate Abraham Lincoln's birthday, an undistinguished senator from Wisconsin named Joe McCarthy claimed that he had a list of 205 communists working for the State Department and that the Democrats refused to investigate these traitors in the government. The anti-New Deal faction of the party jumped on board. Sympathetic newspapers trumpeted McCarthy's charges, which kept changing and for which he never offered proof, and his colleagues cheered him on, while Congress members from the Republican faction that had signed on to the liberal consensus kept their heads down to avoid becoming the target of his attacks. All but one of them did, that is. Senator Smith recognized the damage McCarthy and his ilk were doing to the nation. She had seen the effects of his behavior up close in Maine, where the faction of the Republican Party that supported McCarthy had supported the state's Ku Klux Klan. On June 1st, 1950, only 4 months after McCarthy made his infamous speech in Wheeling, Smith stood up in the Senate to make a short speech. She began, "I would like to speak briefly about a serious national condition. It is a national feeling of fear and frustration that could result in national suicide in the end of everything that we Americans hold dear. I speak as a Republican. I speak as a woman. I speak as a United States Senator. I speak as an American." Referring to Senator McCarthy, who was sitting 2 rows behind her, Senator Smith condemned the leaders in her party who were destroying lives with wild accusations. Those of us who shout the loudest about Americanism and making character assassinations are all too frequently those who, by our own words and acts, ignore some of the basic principles of Americanism, she pointed out. Americans have the right to criticize, to hold unpopular beliefs, to protest, and to think for themselves. Senator Smith wanted a Republican victory in the upcoming elections, she explained, to replace Harry Truman's Democratic administration, for which she had plenty of harsh words, with a Republican regime that lacks political integrity or intellectual honesty would prove equally disastrous to this nation. I do not want to see the Republican Party ride to political victory on the 4 horsemen of calumny: fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear. I doubt if the Republican Party could do so, she added, simply because I do not believe the American people will uphold any political party that puts political exploitation above natural interest. Surely we Republicans are not that desperate for victory. While it might be a fleeting victory for the Republican Party, it would be a more lasting defeat for the American people. Surely it would ultimately be suicide for the Republican Party and the two-party system that has protected our American liberties from the dictatorship of a one-party system. As an American, I contemn a Republican fascist as much as I condemn a Democrat communist, she said. They are equally dangerous to you and me and to our country. Smith presented a declaration of conscience listing 5 principles she hoped her party would adopt. It ended with a warning. It is high time that we all stop being tools and victims of totalitarian techniques. Techniques that, if continued here unchecked, will surely end what we have come to cherish as the American way of life. 6 other Republican senators signed on to Senator Smith's declaration. There were 2 reactions to the speech within the party. McCarthy sneered at Snow White and the 6 dwarfs. Other Republicans quietly applauded this courage, but refused to show similar courage themselves with public support. In the short term, Senator Smith's voice was largely ignored in the public arena, and then when the Korean War broke out, forgotten. She was right. 4 years later, the Senate condemned McCarthy. And while Senator Smith was later awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, McCarthy has gone down in history as a disgrace to the Senate and to the United States of America. And that was from Heather Cox Richardson.
So today we're kind of talking about that old saying, those who forget history are bound to repeat history. So we're trying to give an overview of, yes, we broke away from the king. We've done all these wonderful things, but in the meantime, there have been other things going on. So I think, Steve, you're going to be doing something right now with that. Okay. I gave you, I passed out your own personal Constitution Declaration of Independence. Depending on which one you have, page 40 or page 35 is the declaration that you can read along. And please, when we get to the part where we have our citizens, our patriotic citizens, speak out, please join in and express your own feelings about the same things that happened in 1774 and 1775. Okay.
So, what I would consider to be one of the most remarkable documents ever written, I will now come into character. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. Where are you, Jack? Jack.
Fellow citizens, he, the king, has dissolved representative houses repeatedly, proposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of people.
Yeah.
He has made judgments dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount of payment of their salaries.
For depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury.
He, the king, has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these United States are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish contract, and to do all acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of our divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Huzzah!
We go on.
I'm now going to read what's typically called the Wampanoag Declaration of Independence from 1833. In 1833, the self-educated Methodist minister, William Apess, arrived in Mashpee. A Pequot Indian, Apess was an itinerant missionary who moved about New England, preaching to the scattered remnants of native communities. He was appalled by what he found in Mashpee. On May 21st, 1833, Apess addressed the council, draft a formal protest. It drew heavily on words written by the founding fathers. The Mashpee demanded to be free of the overseers, who they referred to as their masters. The document set forth their chief grievances: governance by white outsiders, who refused to consult the tribe about anything, was demeaning and intolerable. Mashpee asserted their right to rule themselves. The overseers misused their authority to dispose of Native American property as they pleased. Meadows and woodlots were auctioned off, other land was rented out, and white farmers were permitted to let their cattle graze on Indian pastures and take fish from Indian waters. The Mashpee lived in poverty while the white men charged to oversee them grew rich. The document concluded with a resolution. As of July 1, 1833, the Indians of Mashpee would no longer tolerate encroachment on their lands. They would not permit any white man to come upon our plantation to cut or carry our wood or hay without our permission. About 100 women and men signed the petition. Yes. They did. They signed the petition, and that is the Wampanoag Declaration of Independence of 1833.
Moving on historically, one of the reasons we wanted to include the Black National Anthem is that most of us here grew up without learning that song. If you grew up in a segregated school, you learned it. As you saw, 1900, James Weldon Johnson wrote a poem. His brother put music to it. It is now well known and well sung by you all. You did a great job this morning. And so we follow through in some of the information. We can talk more at the discussion, the whole idea of when slavery actually ended. Frederick Douglass was born a slave in 1818 in the state of Maryland. He escaped, eventually coming to New York State, where the slavery was outlawed. He became his own person. He was born Frederick Bailey, but he decided he liked the name Douglass better. And he spent years traveling in New England and giving talks. So I'm going to read the words that he wrote that he delivered July 5th, 1852. So slavery was still allowed in many states, and it was before the Civil War. He gave his talk in Rochester, New York, to an abolition group. This was before the 13th Amendment, which eliminated slavery throughout the country. But as I said, other states, 1790s in Massachusetts and New York, slavery was illegal. This is also being given today, I believe, at the Cape Verdean Museum. And that's kind of where I first got involved in that, reading it. It's been about 8 years that I've done that and know about this reading. And it's something I think that should be in our history books. We have to talk to our son if he reads it to his students. What is the slave to the 4th of July? Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give frame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom, of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? Am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence? I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. Would to God, both for your sake and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him, who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee? When the chains of servitude have been torn from his limbs, I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak, and the lame man leap as a hart. Such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of the glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals immeasurable distance between us. The blessing in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn.
Good morning, dear ones. And happy birthday to us one and all. I had a little trouble writing the poem this week because I just had so many feelings and emotions roiling around inside me about what is and what has been and what could be. But anyway, the poem is called The Safety of Kindness. Not to say that we're always going to be safe even when we're kind, but the kindness is worth it. It's important. Every morning we rise from our desks, hand on heart, pledge the flag. One lucky person leads, then chooses a song to sing. My country, 'tis of thee, always a crowd favorite. We promise in unison. Mother takes me to the voting poll. Behind the curtain, she casts her ballot in secret. Women have had the vote since 1920, 4 years before her birth. My father does not tell her how to vote. When I was 13, a 13-year-old bookworm, I haunted the library, free to choose random books. I pulled a volume from a history shelf, opened the pages to find abominations. Black and white photos of emaciated men stare into the camera. Words I have never heard before flood the pages. Pogrom, Kristallnacht, Gestapo, concentration camps. I look around for someone to explain the questions that are screaming in my head. Is this real? Did this really happen? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? Steeped in the safety of Presbyterian kindness, it seemed impossible that humans would treat other humans so cruelly. The only temporary relief was knowing these scary things had happened far away. Not in our land of the free, not our home of the brave. But over the years, I discovered equally savage accounts. Masters owning and selling dark-skinned people into slavery. The sly lying and slaughter of indigenous peoples. The illegal internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. As an adult, I read The Ugly American and sobbed. Is it a Pavlovian response? The way my heart lifts at an American flag snapping in the wind against a China blue sky. Am I a sucker for still loving the Declaration of Independence and honoring the promise and hope of the Constitution? I know people. I know people around the world who have similar golden rules on which to hang their hearts. People who might be afraid, but still lead the charge in the name of change.